Hello humanoids, welcome to Halfling Hobbies. I'm Halfling Hannah, and D&D is a role-playing game. It's in the name. Players have a character, they pretend to be that character to interact with other players and the dungeon master. That's D&D. It's a simple concept, and yet this idea of role-playing can be extremely intimidating to brand new players. As a matter of fact, it can be so intimidating that there are few new players who are completely comfortable with the idea right out the gate. So how can we, as DMs, help to make our brand new players feel more comfortable with roleplay? Let's talk about it. Here we go. So if you saw my video from a couple of days ago, we talked about introducing brand new players to Dungeons & Dragons, and one of the things that I talked about was roleplay. Players that are new to Dungeons & Dragons aren't comfortable with the idea of immediately becoming their character right off the bat. They're not actors. They're not used to that. And so you as the DM kind of have to coach them and teach them how to do that in D&D. The first thing, and this is what I mentioned in introducing new players, but the first thing you need to remember is that you encourage them to roleplay, but you never demand it. So demanding them to roleplay and saying you have to be your character is just going to make the matter worse because they're already nervous, they're already intimidated, they are already not 100% comfortable being that open with a group of people, and then suddenly you have the DM demanding them to do something. It's just probably going to turn them off from D&D and they're not going to want to play anymore, and that is not what we want. Instead, you encourage. Whenever an opportunity arises and they say something like, my character would say this, encourage them and say, and you know, how would your character do that? Do you mind trying to say that? And if they're uncomfortable and they say, no, I don't want to do that, don't push them. There will be more opportunities. The more comfortable they get, the more likely they are to roleplay. Next up, give them low stress opportunities to practice roleplay. So if they are suddenly in front of a royal court and you say, will you roleplay your conversation with the king? That's really scary and they're probably not going to be comfortable with that. However, if you have some NPCs that are fun and lighthearted and you give them that opportunity to roleplay, they're much more likely to start out roleplaying that way. So make sure that the opportunities in which you're saying, hey, will you roleplay this conversation, is not super high stress situation where they could, I don't know, die if they do it wrong. That is not the time to ask new players to roleplay. Give them low stress opportunities and lots of them, not for extended amounts of time because again, that's intimidating, but just small little snippets and conversations. During your D&D sessions, also make sure that you are asking questions. So all of your players, no matter what range that they are, whether they're veterans or brand new, they're likely going to be doing different things during the session, and you're probably used to asking them questions about what the player is doing, but you need to be super intentional with this with brand new players. At different points in the session, and often, be saying, hey, I want you thinking about what your character might be doing right now. Hey, I want you thinking about what your character might say. I'm going to come back to you here in just a few minutes. Giving them time to think about what their character might say increases the likelihood that when you ask them to roleplay, they actually will, because they're not caught off guard or on the spot. They've had time to think things through. So make sure you're asking questions like this. How do you imagine that conversation going? How do you imagine your character would walk into the room? Where do you imagine your character would stand during this conversation? What would your character do if? In this situation, what is your character doing? What does your character say? How do you think your character would feel during this moment? And what is your PC doing now? These questions help get a new player into the mindset of thinking like their character, and being reminded of it several times gives them the opportunity to get used to that and to start role-playing in their head before they start role-playing in front of others. Finally, reward roleplay. For brand new players especially, if the goal is to get them to come out of their shell and roleplay more, then you should be rewarding them every time they do that. Humans just work that way. If we get a reward for something, we're more likely to do that action again. So reward them in some way. My favorite way is with inspiration. I love the inspiration system. Hate me if you want to. I don't care. And you can hate it and we're still friends. But I love the inspiration system because it is an easy way for me to reward actions that I want to see more, such as roleplay. A great roleplay situation will get my players some inspiration. However, if you don't like inspiration, then there are some other ways that you can reward players for role-playing well, such as giving them additional information that perhaps they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, giving them discounts on items if they role-play that situation with an NPC, giving them items in general, giving them quests that can only be found from those NPCs that they interact with, and finally, telling your player themselves how much you really enjoyed that role play and that they are doing a fantastic job. Not all rewards have to be in-game. You can simply pull your player away after the session is over and say, hey, I noticed that you were trying this, and I noticed that you were really coming out of your shell tonight, and it seemed like you had a lot of fun, and I personally thought it was awesome, and I love what you're doing with your character. I think it's a lot of fun. Keep doing that. You'd be amazed how far just that little bit of praise and positive encouragement goes with players. Then finally, if you're still having problems, you've done everything and you're still having problems getting a player to roleplay, make sure that you talk to them. Outside of the game, not in front of anybody, you can even text them and say, hey, I noticed that you're not really getting into the roleplay aspect of the game. Is there something that you're uncomfortable with? Or is there anything that I can do to help you feel more comfortable within the group? Talking to your players is the best way to figure out exactly what it is that's causing a problem with them role-playing. And you might be surprised exactly what the problem could be. It could be a simple solution, such as I never know what to say, and you and your player can come up with some options for the next session of things that their character might say, or brainstorm what their character is like. Roleplay is an incredible part of Dungeons & Dragons and can be so much fun, and honestly is necessary to create the story that you want to tell. So helping brand new players get more comfortable with roleplay is really important. I hope that you take the time to encourage and help your players become awesome role players. Until next time, my friends, may your game have advantage. Halfling Hannah here, signing out. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Halfling Hobbies.